Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When I was born, my family had a lot of money, but my dad was into some sketchy business. When I turned 17, my parents basically lost all of their money. My dad was in debt and owed money to a lot of bad people. He owed one man $100,000. When I turned 16, I got my first boyfriend. He was really caring and our families were friends. My parents actually loved my boyfriend at the time. But when I turned 17, my parents asked me if I was okay with an arranged marriage. I told them absolutely not because I had every intention to marry my boyfriend. He and I had already agreed that we'd get married when we turned 18. Slowly, my dad started insisting that I needed to consider it. After I kept saying no, he finally decided to tell me the truth. He told me that we owed one guy $100,000 and the only way that he would let my dad off the hook was by marrying me. He even offered my parents money in exchange for my hand in marriage. I was terrified. Part 2 is of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. I found out about the truth that my dad owed $100,000. He basically told me that the only way we were going to save our family was if I married this man, and that he offered my dad money in exchange for me. I was actually scared for my life because this man was known to everybody for being dangerous. I couldn't believe my mom was going along with it, but she said it was the only way that we weren't going to get our house taken away. They basically told me not to worry because I could always get a divorce from him. But of course I didn't want to marry him at all. That very night I snuck out of my house and went to my boyfriend's house. I told him everything my parents said and he was shocked. After discussing it for a few hours, we actually decided to run away. I knew I had to go back to my house, but when I looked at my phone, I had 10 missed calls from my parents. When I got home, they were waiting for me at the gate. And guess what? The strange man was there. My parents casually introduced me to this man. And when I looked at him, he was about 20 years older than me. He looked me up and down and handed my dad a check. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how my parents tried to sell me off to a strange man so that he could marry me. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. The man looked me up and down and just stared at me. He handed my dad a check. That's when I yelled out that I was gonna go pack my stuff. Quickly packed a bag and escaped through my window. Luckily, my room was on the first floor. I ran for a few blocks where my boyfriend was in his car. Once I got in, we turned off our phones and drove an hour away. Then he told me he had a surprise for me. We got to this strange house and he told me to get out. When we went inside, there was a woman waiting for us. That's when he got down on one knee and gave me a ring. He told me that he would marry me in order to save my life. Everything happened so fast and we got married. When I turned on my phone, I had 100 missed calls from my parents. I told them what happened and they begged me to come back home. When we got there, the strange man was there waiting for me. My now husband and I tell him to leave me alone. Thankfully, he ended up leaving. A few months later, my parents were debt-free. My mom sold all her jewelry and my dad sold his cars and a few other things. They should have done that from the beginning instead of trying to sell me. It's been 2 years since all that happened and I'm still married. The strange man has tried to contact me through Instagram. He offered me money once again to marry him. I told my parents and they think we should get a restraining order. What do you guys think we should do?
I literally want to cry. So if you didn't know, I have a sister and her name's Ashley. And we both have boyfriends. And every night we both fall asleep on the phone with our boyfriends. So one day we're all hanging out and we're like just talking. And my sister's boyfriend looks at me and he's like, "You need to stop going into your sister's room in the middle of the night." And I look at him and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a reason to go into her room. Like, I don't go into her room, especially in the middle of the night." Then my boyfriend hops in the conversation and he's like, no. He's like, "No, I hear Ashley go into Kayla's room every night and stare at her." So me and my sister both look at each other and we're like, we don't go into each other's rooms, do we? And we agreed that we do not. And they said this has been going on for months. So for months, somebody or something has been going into me and my sister's room for about 15 minutes every night and watching us sleep. But it only gets worse.
Get this. So for a couple of years now, I have been working seasonally retail. Stay with me. So during the Christmas season, this guy comes in. And I was like, "Hello, sir. Welcome in. Is there anything I could help you with today?" And he goes, "Can I have your number?" And into that, I was like, and he was like, "Oh, you're married." And I was like, "No, sir. Actually, I'm engaged. I'm not engaged. I wear this ring out so that if somebody hits on me, I just can be nice and just be like, sorry. I know it's terrible. Sorry, whatever. Moving on." So he was like, "Oh, it's too bad you're engaged because I'd love to take you out." And I was like, "Yeah, anyway, how can I help you?" And this man goes, "I'm actually looking for a necklace for my girlfriend." His girlfriend. Then he asks where the $50 and under section is. I was working at a jewelry store, a nice jewelry store. I said, "Unfortunately, there's only a few items in that price range." Showed it to him. He said, "Thanks," winks at me and walks out the door. Somebody come get your man.
My parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, let's get straight into it. Ever since I was a kid, everyone would compliment me on how beautiful I was. Literally got complimented everywhere me and my family went. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, it's important. My parents didn't see me as their beautiful child. My parents seen me as dollar signs. I was literally up for sale and my parents were bidding on who would pay the most to marry me. My mom started teaching me how to cook and clean and how to keep a man happy. One day while my mom was getting me ready and all dolled up for dinner, I told my mom I didn't want to marry anyone, and she flat out told me I didn't have a choice. Well, little did I know that exact night my mom and I was having this conversation, my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. Like for part two on how my parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom was getting me all dolled up for dinner and my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. I didn't know this at the time, of course. My mom and I go downstairs and I hear my dad say, "There she is. Isn't she beautiful?" Then I looked at a man who just smiled and said, "I like it." I asked my mom who was that guy, and she told me, "Shh, that's your father's brother, sweetie, no more talking." So we all sat down and had dinner, and my uncle was just staring at me, smiling at me, and looking at me up and down. He was literally studying me. My dad even looked at him for validation. I was so confused. Little did I know this wasn't just a dinner. It was a tryout, an audition, if you will. If I would be good enough for my uncle. He was actually rich and looking for a wife, and my dad was trying to sell me to him. Running out of time, like for part three. Part three on how my parents sold me to my uncle. So like I said, we were having dinner and my dad was trying to sell me to my rich uncle. He was literally pitching a sale. She's beautiful, she cooks, she cleans, and she's very smart. And oh, she still has her V card. It was at that moment it hit me. I figured out what was going on. When my uncle left, my parents told me good job for being a good girl. I cried and told my parents I did not want to marry that man. I was 15 and he was like 40, but my parents told me I was going to marry him and I was going to like it. Well, fast forward a year later and they definitely sold me. And I lost my V card to my uncle on our wedding night. I hated it at first, but I kind of fell in love with him. And it didn't hurt that he was rich and I kind of lived stress-free. So yeah, my parents sold me and that sucks, but I ended up being okay with it. Lucky. And we all laugh about it now. Yeah, I know it's toxic and corrupt, but this is why it's an anonymous story.